This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult with qualified health practitioners before making any health changes.
You think you're still broken, but have you noticed how calm you've become in moments that once made you tremble? You think you're still lost, but don't you see how far you've walked without needing anyone to guide your steps? Maybe, just maybe, you've healed more than you realize. There comes a time when the chase no longer excites you, when the familiar chaos that once called your name starts to sound like noise. You begin to feel something shifting inside you, a quiet rebellion against the patterns that kept you trapped. For so long, you ran toward the very things that tore you apart. You mistook intensity for love, confusion for passion, and inconsistency for depth. You believed the more you sacrificed, the more worthy you became of being loved. You chased what broke you because deep down, you thought healing would come from the same hands that hurt you. But life, in its wisdom, eventually teaches you that real love doesn't demand you lose yourself to keep it alive. Real love does not burn you to prove its warmth. One day you wake up and realize you're tired, not just physically, but soul deep tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep, because it's not about exhaustion, it's about clarity. You see, healing begins when you finally stop running toward what destroys your peace. It's in that moment when you understand that peace is not earned through suffering. It's chosen, guarded, and protected. You stop needing to prove your worth to people who never valued it. You stop explaining your intentions to those committed to misunderstanding you. And you stop breaking yourself just to be accepted by those who were never meant to understand your softness. There is a sacred moment in healing when you realize your energy is precious. You begin to feel the weight of every time you poured from an empty cup, every time you silenced your voice to make someone else comfortable, every time you called pain patience. And in that realization, something inside you stands up. You start saying no to what drains you, even if it feels uncomfortable. You start saying yes to yourself, even when it scares you, because you understand that peace without company is better than company without peace. You stop chasing what breaks you when you start valuing your stillness. You remember what it feels like to breathe without fear. You no longer crave the thrill of chaos because you've tasted the serenity of calm. You stop needing validation from people who only showed up to take from you. You no longer measure your worth by how much pain you can endure. You stop running after people who make you feel small, and you start walking in the direction of your wholeness. Healing, you learn, isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the soft decision to let go of what no longer grows you. You begin to notice that your peace feels different now. What used to attract you no longer holds power over you. The games, the inconsistency, the endless cycle of proving and pleasing, they all begin to lose their charm. Because once you've felt peace, drama becomes unbearable. You learn to find comfort in distance rather than chaos. You start cherishing your boundaries like sacred gates, protecting the garden of your spirit. You learn that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are bridges that show others how to meet you with respect. You stop chasing what breaks you when you understand that closure doesn't always come in words. It comes in acceptance. It comes in realizing that not everyone you love will know how to love you, that not every story needs to end with understanding, that some things are not meant to be fixed, only released. Healing teaches you that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when to stop giving CPR to a connection that's been lifeless for too long. It's learning to let go of people who cannot meet you where your soul stands. The more you heal, the less you chase. You no longer run after explanations from those who left you confused. You no longer need apologies to find your peace. You stop waiting for the people who hurt you to recognize your value because you've realized something profound. Your worth doesn't decrease when someone fails to see it. It only becomes clearer to you. You start seeing yourself through new eyes, gentle eyes. You look at your scars not as reminders of what broke you, but as proof of what you've survived. There's power in that awareness. You start to understand that what you once called love was often a reflection of your own wounds. You were drawn to familiar pain because it felt like home. But when you begin to heal, that home no longer feels comfortable. You stop finding comfort in dysfunction. You begin to desire something softer, truer, and calmer. You crave conversations that heal, not arguments that hurt. You crave presence, not performance. You crave understanding, not control. That shift within you, that hunger for peace, is your healing speaking. And with that healing comes a deeper level of self-respect. You start moving differently. You no longer beg for attention. You attract alignment. You no longer shrink yourself to be understood. You rise to be seen. You no longer beg people to stay. You trust that what is meant for you will never need to be chased. You no longer confuse attachment with love. You understand that love flows freely while attachment clings desperately. You no longer hold on out of fear. You release out of faith. Every healed part of you learns to honor what the broken parts once couldn't. You forgive yourself for staying too long, for loving too hard, for not knowing better. You stop blaming yourself for the lessons you had to learn the hard way. You stop carrying guilt for outgrowing what no longer fits. Because healing is not about being perfect, it's about being honest. And the truth is, you were never broken beyond repair. You were only learning the difference between love that hurts and love that heals. So when you no longer chase what breaks you, understand what that truly means. It means you've learned to recognize your worth without needing others to confirm it. It means you've outgrown the cycle of pain disguised as passion. It means you've stopped confusing being wanted with being valued. It means you've chosen yourself, not in arrogance, but in peace. You've learned that peace is not found in the arms of others, but in the embrace of your own acceptance. That realization changes everything. You start walking with a quieter confidence. You smile differently, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally trust yourself. You no longer need to chase what is fleeting because you found something permanent inside you. You found home within your own heart. You found love that doesn't hurt. And when you finally reach that place, the chase ends, not because you gave up, but because you woke up. You woke up to your worth, your power, and your peace. And once you do, there's no turning back. You've healed more than you realize. There was a time when your heart burned with the fire of what they did to you. You replayed the moments, the words, the betrayal, again and again, as if repeating it could somehow rewrite it. You wanted them to feel what you felt. You wanted them to understand the pain they caused, the nights they stole from your peace, the wounds they left without a trace of remorse. Revenge felt like justice, and justice felt like healing. But as time moved and your soul began to breathe again, you realized something deeper. The peace you were seeking could never be found through pain, because the energy you feed grows stronger, and feeding your hurt only kept it alive. There comes a sacred moment in your healing when you wake up and feel lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because the anger no longer sits at the edge of your tongue. You stop rehearsing comebacks. You stop planning how to prove your worth to those who couldn't see it. You stop waiting for karma to do your bidding. You stop wishing for their downfall. You stop because you've finally outgrown the need to win a battle that doesn't exist anymore. What once consumed you now feels distant, like an echo from another lifetime. That's how you know peace has arrived, quietly, without applause, without permission. When peace takes root inside you, it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes like a deep breath after holding too much for too long. It comes when you look back at what used to break you and feel nothing but understanding. You start to see people differently, not as villains, but as humans lost in their own pain. The same pain that once blinded you now opens your eyes. You begin to understand that hurt people, and you were one of them once. You remember your own moments of confusion, your own mistakes, your own selfish silences. That realization softens your heart. It doesn't excuse what they did, but it frees you from being chained to it. Peace doesn't erase the memory, it transforms your relationship with it. You still remember the betrayal, the disappointment, the heartbreak, but they no longer define you. They no longer control your reactions. You don't need revenge because you've discovered something stronger. Detachment. The ability to walk away without bitterness, to close a door without slamming it, to end a chapter without tearing the pages. That's maturity, and it's born from the ashes of the anger you once carried like a shield. For a long time, you believed revenge would give you closure. You thought if they could just see how much you've grown, or if life could just humble them the way they humbled you, you'd finally be free. But healing taught you that closure doesn't come from their suffering, it comes from your release. The moment you stop needing to prove anything is the moment you reclaim your power. You realize that revenge is a form of attachment. It keeps you tied to what hurt you. Every time you think of how to make them regret, you hand them the keys to your peace. Every time you replay the story, you reopen the wound. But when you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve rest, you begin to heal. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's not about saying what they did was okay. It's saying, I refuse to let this pain define my tomorrow. It's strength, pure divine strength. Because forgiveness requires courage. It requires you to release the story that made you the victim and step into a new identity, the one who survived. You begin to see that holding anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to fall. It only burns you from the inside. Peace, on the other hand, is like cool water. It nourishes your soul, calms your spirit, and restores your power. When you start feeling peace instead of revenge, your body knows it too. The tension leaves your shoulders. The heaviness fades from your chest. You start sleeping better. You laugh again. You catch yourself smiling at small things, realizing that life has continued beautifully, quietly, faithfully. You start feeling grateful, not for the pain itself, but for what it taught you. You learn to appreciate the wisdom that came from the wounds. You understand that revenge would have kept you small, but peace expanded you. It gave you space to grow, to rebuild, to rediscover yourself beyond the shadow of that pain. Healing transforms your focus. Instead of asking, how do I make them see what they did? You start asking, what can I learn from what happened? Instead of saying, I hope they regret it, you whisper, I hope they heal too. That's when you know your soul has evolved. You stop wishing for punishment and start wishing for understanding. You realize that their behavior was never about your worth. It was a reflection of their wounds. And realizing that allows you to detach from their actions completely. Peace teaches you compassion, not the kind that allows mistreatment, but the kind that allows you to let go. You can still keep your boundaries while wishing them well. You can still protect your heart while freeing theirs. It's not about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about refusing to let that hurt become the story of your life. You no longer define yourself by how deeply you were wounded, but by how gracefully you rose from it. That is your revenge, your happiness, your serenity, your glow. There's something powerful about walking in peace when the world expected you to fall apart. There's something divine about choosing to heal instead of harm, because when you choose peace, You break the cycle. You refuse to carry pain into your future relationships, your future dreams, your future self. You stop being the echo of your hurt and start becoming the voice of your healing. That's not just growth, that's transformation. And the people who hurt you, life has a way of teaching them, not through your anger, but through time. Everyone faces their reflection eventually, but by then, you won't even be watching. You'll be too busy living, too busy loving, too busy being at peace with yourself. That's what true freedom looks like, when you no longer need revenge because peace has already given you everything you were searching for. When you reach that point, you realize the universe always had a plan. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every moment of anger was leading you to this place of quiet power. You realize the greatest victory is not watching them suffer. It's watching yourself rise. You are no longer ruled by what happened. You are guided by what you've learned. Peace becomes your crown, forgiveness your armor, and self-love your kingdom. So when you feel that calm where rage used to live, understand it's not weakness, it's wisdom. You've simply chosen to value your energy more than your ego. You've chosen peace over revenge, and in doing so, you've chosen yourself. That choice changes everything. It's the sign that your heart has healed, your spirit has matured, and your soul finally remembers its worth. You no longer need to win, you just need to be free. And you are beautifully, completely, eternally free. For much of your life, you may have believed that being chosen was proof that you were enough. You waited for someone to see you, to pick you, to validate your existence. You tried to earn love by being kind, by being useful, by being everything but yourself. You thought if you gave enough, cared enough, or stayed long enough, someone would finally look at you and say, "You are the one." But healing whispers a different truth. It tells you that your worth was never waiting to be found in someone else's recognition. It was always inside you, whole, unshaken, complete. You just forgot to see it because you were too busy proving it. There comes a day when the waiting exhausts you, when the silence after trying so hard feels heavier than the rejection itself. You start realizing that being chosen by others has never brought you the peace you imagined it would. The approval fades, the affection shifts, the people you tried to please change their minds, and you're left chasing a moving target. You begin to understand that love built on needing to be chosen will always feel fragile because it depends on something you cannot control. That's when the awakening begins, when you stop asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" and start whispering, "Why did I think they needed to?" It takes time to unlearn the hunger for validation, to stop waiting for someone's attention to make you feel visible, to stop thinking that worth has to be earned. You start noticing how often you've betrayed yourself for acceptance, how many times you said yes when your heart screamed no, how many times you stayed silent to keep the peace, how many times you made yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Healing begins when you finally refuse to keep shrinking just to be seen. You begin to understand that love that must be begged for is not love. It's fear wearing affection as a disguise. You stop mistaking being chosen for being valued, because if love is real, you won't need to chase it. It will meet you where you are, not ask you to lose yourself to earn its presence. You start realizing that your worth has never been up for negotiation. You start holding yourself differently, with reverence, with patience, with softness. You learn to look at your reflection without judgment. You start saying, "I am enough," even if no one tells me I am. That's where your power begins to return. When you stop needing to be chosen, something beautiful happens. Your energy shifts. You no longer move from desperation. You move from peace. You no longer enter rooms wondering if people will like you. You enter wondering if they are aligned with your truth. You no longer settle for almost love, for conditional care, for temporary warmth. You become unwilling to barter your self-worth for attention. You start understanding that solitude isn't punishment, it's purification. It's where you meet the parts of yourself you used to abandon. It's where you learn that the love you were searching for outside has been waiting patiently within you all along. You start noticing the freedom in not being chosen. You realize that rejection can be redirection, a divine act of protection from what was never meant to nourish you. The people who overlook you are not your loss, they are your release. You begin to see that being left behind doesn't mean you are unworthy. It means your journey no longer fits inside someone else's limitations. You no longer take it personally when people walk away because you understand that everyone's path unfolds differently. You stop needing explanations for why things didn't work out. You trust that what is meant for you will always find you without you having to chase or compromise your truth to receive it. Healing from the need to be chosen is learning to rest in your own presence. It's sitting in silence and realizing you are not lonely, you are whole. It's finding joy in your own company and peace in your own rhythm. You begin to see how deeply you used to depend on others for validation, how their approval became the air you breathed. And now you are learning to breathe for yourself. You are learning to give yourself the love you once begged for. That shift is liberation, because once you taste the freedom of self-worth, you will never settle for crumbs again. You start setting boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect your peace. You realize that being loved doesn't mean being available for everyone at any time. It means honoring yourself first, so you can give from overflow, not emptiness. You stop allowing others to define your value based on how much you can do for them. You stop being the emotional caretaker for those who never show up for you. You stop apologizing for existing, for needing, for feeling. You stop saying, "I'm sorry," just for taking up space. Because now you know you deserve to take up space. You were never meant to fit in someone else's shadow. You were meant to stand in your own light. There's a peace that comes when you no longer seek to be chosen, a quiet confidence that blooms when you start choosing yourself. You find joy in small victories, waking up without anxiety, saying no without guilt, walking away from what doesn't honor you. You stop looking for mirrors in other people's eyes because you've found your reflection in your own soul. You realize that being unchosen was never rejection, it was redirection toward yourself. You begin to see that your worth doesn't rise and fall with someone's ability to recognize it. It simply exists, unshaken, unbothered, undeniable. When you reach that understanding, your relationships transform. You attract differently. You no longer chase. You align. You no longer settle for attention. You seek connection. You no longer pour into others hoping they'll fill you back. You pour because you're already full. You learn that real love begins when two whole people meet, not to complete each other, but to share their completeness. And because you've chosen yourself, you now have the capacity to choose others freely, without fear, without need, without losing your essence in the process. You stop competing for love because you know that what's meant for you will never require competition. You stop overgiving because you understand that giving without reciprocity is not kindness, it's self-neglect. You stop measuring your worth in someone else's attention span, and in that stillness, you finally realize something powerful. The people who couldn't see your value were never supposed to define it. The universe never asked them to choose you. It asked you to choose yourself. You start loving yourself in ways you once begged others to. You write yourself love letters through the choices you make. You rest without guilt, dream without doubt, and speak without fear. You no longer need to be the favorite, the perfect, the savior. You just need to be real. And being real, you learn, is more beautiful than being chosen. Because when you are real, you attract what is meant for your soul, not what flatters your ego. So when you stop needing to be chosen, you discover the freedom of belonging to yourself. You become your own safe place. You find peace in your reflection. You realize that being chosen by someone else was never the goal. It was always about learning to choose yourself. That choice becomes your foundation. It's the quiet promise that says, I am enough, even if no one claps for me. I am worthy, even if no one stays. I am whole, even if no one chooses me. And when you truly know that, you'll understand you were never waiting to be chosen. You were waiting to remember you were never unworthy to begin with. There was a time when silence terrified you, when the quiet moments between the noise felt like a mirror reflecting everything you were trying so hard not to see. You filled your days with distractions, surrounded yourself with sound, movement, and people, because silence made you feel exposed. It made you feel small, lonely, and unseen. You feared that if you ever stopped, if you ever just sat in that stillness, all the pain you buried would rise to the surface. So you kept running from thoughts, from memories, from yourself. But healing has a way of finding you even in the spaces you try to avoid. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to breathe differently. The silence that once haunted you starts to feel like a friend you haven't seen in years. At first, it's uncomfortable. You sit alone, and your mind tries to fill the space. It tells you stories about what went wrong, who left, and what you should have done differently. But this time, instead of escaping, you stay. You sit with it, you listen. You realize that silence isn't your enemy. It's the voice of your soul, gently asking to be heard. You start noticing the sound of your own breathing, the rhythm of your heart, the quiet strength that's always been there beneath the noise. You understand that peace doesn't come from avoiding yourself. It comes from meeting yourself with compassion. There's something sacred about the moment you stop running. When you stop needing music, conversation, or company to fill the void inside. When you can sit in your room with nothing but your thoughts and feel safe. That's the moment healing begins to show its face. You discover that the emptiness you once feared was never emptiness at all. It was space. Space for growth, for reflection, for rebirth. You begin to realize that silence was not punishing you. It was preparing you. It was teaching you how to listen, how to feel, how to be. In silence, you meet the truth. You meet the parts of yourself you ignored for too long. The wounded child, the buried emotions, the unanswered questions. You look at them, and for the first time, you don't flinch. You hold them gently, the way you wish someone had held you. You stop labeling your feelings as good or bad. You let them flow, and you watch them pass like waves returning to the ocean. You learn that healing isn't about silencing your pain. It's about giving it space to speak so it can finally rest. You start to understand that silence is not loneliness. It's intimacy with your soul. It's where you remember who you are beneath all the roles you've played. It's where you reconnect with your spirit, your intuition, your truth. In silence, you no longer seek answers outside of yourself. You begin to trust the wisdom within. You realize that the guidance you've been searching for has always lived inside you, waiting for the noise to fade so it could whisper. That whisper becomes your compass. It reminds you that you are not lost, only learning how to listen again. There was a time when you needed someone to fill the silence with their presence, to distract you from the ache. You thought love meant never feeling alone, but now you see that real love begins when you no longer need someone else to make the quiet bearable. You can sit beside your solitude and feel whole. You can wake up to an empty room and still feel surrounded by peace. You can walk alone and still feel connected to everything. That's the quiet kind of strength that healing brings. Not the loud confidence that needs to be seen, but the gentle assurance that lives within. Silence becomes your teacher. It teaches patience, the kind that doesn't rush what's meant to unfold. It teaches awareness, the kind that sees beyond appearances and feels the truth beneath words. It teaches acceptance, the kind that no longer needs to change the past to find peace in the present. In silence, you learn that not every question needs an answer, not every wound needs to be explained, not every story needs to be retold. Sometimes the greatest healing happens in the pauses, in the spaces between words, in the stillness that asks for nothing but your presence. As you grow more comfortable in silence, you begin to notice its beauty. You hear the wind and realize it's speaking. You watch the sunrise and understand it's telling you something about renewal. You sit beneath the stars and feel their ancient calm. You realize that silence is not empty, it's full of life, full of messages, full of connection. The world speaks in whispers, but only quiet hearts can hear it. And now yours can. When you stop fearing silence, you begin to heal from the inside out. You stop reacting to every noise, every chaos, every storm. You carry peace into places that once triggered your anxiety. You respond with calm instead of defense. You begin to feel grounded, unshaken, rooted in your own energy. You learn that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is aligning. It means the universe is rearranging pieces behind the scenes. It means your soul is resting between battles. You start noticing how much power there is in stillness, how much clarity it brings when you stop forcing answers. You realize that silence isn't about absence, it's about presence, the kind of presence that connects you to something greater than yourself. You feel guided, supported, and safe even when you don't understand how. You begin to see that silence is not the end of sound. It's the beginning of awareness. It's where thoughts slow down enough for truth to surface. You can sit in silence now and not feel the need to fix anything. You can be still and not feel guilty for resting. You can feel peace even when life feels uncertain. You no longer crave constant validation, constant movement, constant noise. You realize that you are allowed to pause. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to exist without performing, without producing, without pleasing. That realization changes everything. You start feeling grateful for the quiet. You start looking forward to it. You protect it because you know silence is where you find your strength again. It's where you hear your intuition, where you meet your faith, where you remember your worth. It's where you become your own safe space. You no longer run from stillness because you finally understand it's not a void, it's a sanctuary. And when you reach that point, when you can sit in silence without feeling empty, you realize you've come home. Home to your breath, home to your heart, home to yourself. You are no longer afraid of the quiet because you've discovered what lives there, your truth, your peace, your essence. And that perhaps is the most beautiful sign of all that you have healed more than you realize. There was a time when every word, every look, every silence could set your heart on fire. You lived in a world where emotions came like storms, sudden, fierce, uncontrollable. Someone said something cruel, and before you could breathe, anger rose in your chest. A disappointment appeared, and pain burst from your tongue before your mind could catch it. You reacted to everything and everyone as if your peace depended on them. You thought being loud meant being strong, that defending yourself at every turn was survival. But now, you're beginning to understand that true strength isn't found in reaction, it's found in response. It's in the pause, the sacred space between what happens and how you choose to meet it. When healing takes root, something inside you begins to slow down. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've started seeing. You start recognizing that your peace is far too precious to be handed to every passing emotion. You stop letting every external chaos dictate your inner world. You begin to observe before you speak, Breathe before you move. Reflect before you reply. That pause, that breath, it becomes your power. It's the quiet proof that you are no longer a prisoner of your past triggers. You're no longer reacting from pain. You're responding from wisdom. It doesn't happen overnight. Growth rarely does. You still feel the fire rise, but now you know what to do with it. You sit with it. You ask it what it's trying to tell you. You realize that your emotions are messengers, not masters. They're not meant to control you, only to guide you. The anger shows you where you still hurt. The sadness shows you where you're still holding on. The anxiety shows you where you're still afraid. But now you no longer fight them or run from them. You listen, you respond, and in that gentle listening, you begin to heal parts of yourself that once screamed for attention through chaos. You start to notice that peace doesn't mean nothing ever disturbs you. It means nothing controls you anymore. You may still feel the sting of someone's words, but you no longer let it define your day. You may still encounter conflict, but you no longer lose yourself in the argument. You've learned to hold your center, to stand grounded even when the world tries to shake you. That's what healing does. It roots you so deeply in your truth that you no longer need to prove it. Once, you reacted to be heard. You raised your voice to demand understanding. You fought to be right. But now, you've learned that you don't have to attend every battle that invites you. You don't need to prove your worth in every disagreement. You realize that peace is not won by shouting louder. It's found in knowing when silence speaks louder than words. You begin to choose your energy more carefully. You understand that not every confrontation deserves your response. Not every opinion deserves your correction. Not every insult deserves your attention. You learn that your calm unsettles what once tried to control you. When you respond instead of react, you start noticing the difference between control and clarity. Reaction is fueled by ego. It wants to win, to be right, to be seen. Response is guided by wisdom. It seeks understanding, peace, and truth. You stop taking everything personally because you finally see that most people's actions have nothing to do with you. They're speaking from their wounds, just as you once did. You no longer feel the need to mirror their energy. You meet them with grace, not to be better, but because you've become freer. Healing teaches you that responding doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means giving them room to breathe before they speak for you. It means asking yourself, what outcome do I truly want? Instead of reacting just to release the pain. It's realizing that responding is not weakness. It's emotional mastery. The ability to remain calm when everything around you is trying to provoke you is one of the highest forms of self-respect. You've learned that peace is not passive, it's powerful. It's the decision to choose clarity over chaos, understanding over argument, and grace over ego. You begin to notice how this shift changes everything. Your relationships become softer. You no longer engage in endless cycles of blame or defensiveness. You listen more. You understand better. You no longer interrupt to protect your pride. You give space to others, not because they're right, but because you value peace over control. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes silence is the only response that speaks truth. This change also transforms your relationship with yourself. You stop reacting harshly to your own mistakes. You no longer drown in guilt when you fall short. You start responding to yourself with compassion. You learn to say, "It's okay, I'm learning." You give yourself the same patience you give to others. You no longer let one bad moment define your entire day. You stop replaying old mistakes as punishment and start seeing them as lessons. That's what it means to respond. You allow yourself to evolve instead of condemning yourself for being human. When you reach this place, life feels lighter. Things that used to shake you now barely move you. You realize that not every storm requires your participation. Some things simply pass if you don't feed them your reaction. You learn that sometimes walking away is the most powerful response of all. You no longer chase closure through confrontation. You understand that peace doesn't need permission. It exists the moment you choose it. You begin to notice the beauty in restraint, the way your silence speaks volumes, the way your calm disarms chaos, the way your patience allows truth to unfold naturally. You start trusting time to reveal what anger once tried to force. You see that the universe has its own way of balancing things, and it doesn't need your rage to do it. You start believing that justice and peace can coexist when your heart is steady. There's a deep kind of confidence that comes from responding instead of reacting. You feel secure in your energy. You know who you are. You know what deserves your attention and what doesn't. You no longer seek validation through arguments or victories. You let your peace speak for itself. You realize that those who truly see you will feel your calm, not your chaos. And those who don't understand your quiet will mistake it for weakness. But that's okay. You've stopped explaining yourself to those still fighting the battles you've already outgrown. This is what healing sounds like: soft, deliberate, grounded. It's not about never feeling anger or pain again. It's about not letting those emotions drive your decisions. It's about choosing wisdom over impulse, growth over reaction. You start to understand that your peace is sacred, and every time you choose to respond instead of react, you honor it. The world will keep testing your patience, trying to pull you back into chaos. But now you smile. You take a breath. You remember that not everything deserves a response, and not every reaction deserves your energy. You walk with grace, knowing that the calm you carry is your power. You've learned that responding doesn't mean being passive. It means being in control of yourself. And in a world that thrives on noise, that calm, steady silence inside you is the loudest proof of how far you've come. Healing isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with grand moments or visible transformation. Sometimes it happens quietly, in the pauses between your thoughts, in the spaces where you used to hurt, in the calm that follows a storm you once thought would never end. There comes a day when you realize you're no longer fighting the same battles in your mind, no longer chasing what doesn't serve you, no longer breaking your own heart to prove your worth. Healing rarely looks like victory. More often, it looks like peace. It's subtle, gentle, almost